Do you want to bust your sales quota? Do you want to join the ranks of top 1% sellers? The Top 1% Sellers podcast gives you the insights and the tools to help you achieve your sales greatness. The podcast features sales and services professionals, leaders, and experts to give you the edge you're looking for. Here's your host, Ash Sadiq.
Hello and welcome everyone. This is the Top 1% Sellers Academy webinar, and today's webinar is with Lewis Schiff. And I'll just take a few minutes here to give you a quick introduction of Lewis's work. He is the author of the new book, First Habit, and his other books include Business Brilliant, Surprising Lessons from the Greatest Self-Made Business Icons. He's also the Executive Director of Inc. Business Owners Council, a membership organization for Inc. magazine's top entrepreneurs and owners of closely held family businesses. He also maintains a blog about behavioral entrepreneurship on Inc.com. Lewis has also co-authored The Influence of Affluence, How the Rich Are Changing America, and the Armchair Millionaire. The reason why I invited Lewis to come talk to our sales audience is because a lot of the content that he has covered in his books is really about mastering your own life and mastering your own skills and really succeeding. And I'd like to take a lot of the conversation we'll do today and really angle it to how do you succeed in your own job, and also how do you create wealth for your family as well. So with that, I'll give the floor to Lewis on the back end. We'll ask some questions, and hopefully you can also give us some questions in the Q&A window as well. We'll be taking a look at those. And with that, Lewis, it's your floor now.
Thank you, Ash. Thanks for that introduction. Yeah, everything you said, we're going to go through some very powerful stuff. I feel very confident in saying that I expect everyone who's listening to this today to be at the very least provoked into thinking. And for some of you, there's some potentially life-changing information ahead. And for me, it's always very exciting to play the role of messenger for that kind of thing. But first, I'll just introduce myself. I've written, as Ash mentioned, a bunch of books. Some of them bestsellers. It's been a privilege to write books. I think of all the things I've done, starting and buying and selling companies, the thing that's meant the most to me over the years has been interviewing very, very successful people. In fact, it's my passion, and it's what I love to do most. And for any of you who have wondered what it would be like to sit down with some of the greatest entrepreneurs of all time, I can tell you it's a thrill, and it's just been the greatest privilege of all my activities. So now, for the next bit of time here that we're together, I want you to remember that since this is about rewiring your brain, guess what? Your brain's going to be involved. So you're going to have to be prepared to think and activate that thing in between your ears. And I've asked Ash to share a little cheat sheet, which he's going to post up a link to. Whether you can download it now or you want to look at it later, it's a little bit of a cheat sheet that's going to allow you to follow along with what we're doing. But again, more than once, I'm going to remind you that you have to think while we rewire your brain. So I'll give you clear warning at those moments. So just a little bit about, not so much me, but about the platform I've built, or the position I've created. Back in 1996, I wrote my first book called The Armchair Millionaire, which was about a way to invest your money in a way that would create wealth in a very thoughtful way. In fact, it's since gone on to, the methodology has since gone on to be awarded more than one Nobel Prize, and that's been exciting to watch. And that book was about something called behavioral economics. And behavioral economics is super simple. It's really just all the different ways that the way our brains are wired affect how we approach the ways we make money in the stock market or in savings. Even things like how we approach coupons in the supermarket all fall under the category of behavioral economics. And then about 10 years later, I wrote this book called Business Brilliant, which evolved the topic of behavioral economics into something called behavioral entrepreneurship. How decision-making affects not just money-making in general, but business building, how our pre-wired attitudes affect the way we build businesses. And out of that book came 7 best practices for how the truly business brilliant, those who are brilliant at business, succeed by exemplifying these behaviors that most likely lead to wealth. Now, this is even more true in the new economy that we're in post 2008. And it's only accelerated since then, but I did the research for this book in 2009. And the thing I learned in writing Business Brilliant was that even though these 7 best practices, which you could read about in the book, it's too long for me to go into today, are there for you, and you'll recognize probably every single one of them. They're all accessible. They're all within reach. Here's the thing. When it comes to this topic of behavioral entrepreneurship, we've got some challenges ahead. And those challenges look a lot like our parents and our families, our teachers and our schools, and our bosses and our employers. Now, all of these people often wish us the best intentions, but they are teaching us a way of going about our careers and developing them that's built on a time that no longer exists and in an economy that no longer exists. And so what the point of Business Brilliant is that it's going to confront you. It's going to ask you to look at the way that you've created wealth or attempted to create wealth. It's going to ask you to do something that's very uncomfortable, which is reevaluate the way you do that. And so if you see on your screen now, you have the image of a steering wheel, and it's called cognitive dissonance, what I'm going to share with you. And let me give you an example that we can all understand. Everyone who's listening to this right now knows that the smartest and safest way to drive a car is to keep 2 hands on the wheel, drive the speed limit, wear your seatbelt, and check your mirrors often. And the statistics behind safe driving back that up, that in fact, that is the smartest way to drive your car. That's a wonderful moment where the conventional wisdom and the data back each other up. But what if I shared with you that over a period of time, the data suggested that driving with one hand, with only one hand on the steering wheel above the speed limit, without wearing your seatbelt and without checking your mirrors, statistically proved to be the safest way to reach your destination? Would you change the way you drive? And more importantly, would you teach your children to drive that way? That's cognitive dissonance, when the data and the beliefs collide, and it's ugly. It just doesn't feel right. And so what I'm going to share with you now is a comparison. I'm going to use numbers, so I'm going to back everything I say to you up with data. I'm going to use numbers to show that what's keeping you from creating wealth is not your abilities, and it's not someone else. It's your capacity to think differently and to overcome the cognitive dissonance that this brings up. How does that sound, Ash?
Sounds really good. And it's really in line with the top 1% sellers factory philosophy that we found that it's really very dependent on the mindset. So I think we're very much in line, Lewis.
Great. Now there's this cheat sheet that Ash put up a link to. So again, you're going to be able to run through this without it, but there it is for you, maybe for later for some of you. So just a quick background on the data that makes up my book, Business Brilliant. So I surveyed 800 households, and I'll just quickly tell you about the 4 groups that we surveyed. You'll recognize all of them. The first I call the middle class, and this is a group that had a net worth of less than $1 million. And they made up about half, 49% of the people I surveyed for this book. Then I asked the exact same questions of a group that I called the middle class millionaire. These are people who started out life in the middle class and went on to create levels of wealth ranging from $1 million to $10 million. They made up 28% of my survey. And we all know people like this if you're not one yourself. And the most common group that I speak to are, in fact, middle class millionaires. I think you'll see throughout this that even middle class millionaires with all that great success of having reached a 7-figure net worth are actually behaving in a way that's preventing them from reaching an 8-figure net worth. But that's my next group, is those who break into 8 figures of net worth. I call the first group the high net worth. They make up 14% of my survey respondents with a $10 to $30 million net worth. And then I've got folks that are just living the dream. You know, they're the billionaires and the 100 millionaires. And I surveyed 73 of them, 9%. It's a very hard number to get to. And I'm really proud of the fact that I got that high. Those folks don't love to sit and share their ideas with guys like me. But the thing about the last 3 groups, the middle class millionaire, the high net worth, and the ultra high net worth, every one of these people I surveyed could not have received more than $50,000 from their families, including the cost of their education, in order to make it into my survey. So that's about as clear of a definition of self-made millionaires you're ever going to find. And they made up over 50% of my survey respondents, people who met that criteria. So let's take a look at what I learned from these 800 households.
Right.
The central message of my program today is that they taught me 3 behaviors that explain their success and that work synergistically, meaning each one of these adds to the other and then adds to the other. And so I will share with you 1, 2, and 3, but never forget that 1 affects 2, 2 affects 3, 3 affects 1, 1 affects 3, 3 affects 2. They affect each other synergistically.
Yeah.
So you can have a positive impact by doing any one of them, but the real explosive power of these 3 habits is doing all 3 of them at the same time. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
So we're going to talk about learning your language, practicing persistence, and upgrading your network. I'll explain all of them with data. I will not ask you to believe me. I'll ask you to believe what the data tells us. I'm also going to share with you something I think is pretty cool, which is the role of luck and magic in creating success. You know, luck and magic is real, and luck and magic is there for us to touch, and let's just call it what it is. There's a reason why some people are lucky, and there's a certain magic to creating success. And I'm going to share with you, I'm going to break down for you why luck finds some of us more than others and how you can invite magic into your life. And I'll do that during the course of this.
Yes.
But let's start with habit number 1, learn your language. So I had a great opportunity to interview Howard Schultz, the Starbucks CEO, took it from 4 companies to over 10,000. And I'm sorry, 4 stores to over 10,000.
Yes.
And he shared with me what is his language, which is his love of the role of coffee historically. In other words, he will tell you, and his smile will go ear to ear when he tells you that at all the critical junctures in history, people have sat down over coffee. They've sat down over coffee to fall in love, to make new friends, to do deals, to create peace treaties. He loves how coffee is always in the center of that, and he believes that by being the best supply chain manager and getting coffee to you, he's creating connections between people. And he famously envisioned Starbucks as what he calls the 3rd place. You've got your home, you've got your office, and now you've got the 3rd place, Starbucks, to meet people. And everything he's done, from creating supply chains to building a retail system to training hundreds of thousands of employees to building a brand, has stemmed from his one true passion, which is to make coffee available to create connections between people. And everything he's learned along the way is built on that. And so what I share in that book you mentioned, Ash, The First Habit, is that you're probably exceptional at something yourself, just like Howard is, but you may not even realize it. And what that means is a lot of us are good at something, but it comes naturally to us, so we don't make that big a deal out of it, or we don't think it's such a big deal. In fact, the thing that you can build your business life around may very well be around that one exceptional thing that you don't think, in fact, you don't even think much of it. And to talk about sales for a moment, in this book, which I think you're going to share a chapter of this book. I don't want to blow that story, but I think you're going to share some of it. In this book, there's an exercise in the segment Ash will share that tells you how you can figure out what you're exceptional at. And I've done this with thousands of people over the years. And what's really amazing are that there's plenty of people who I would put into the category of sales who find out from this process that they are trustworthy, that people like to do business with them, people like to interact with them. And that is in fact the very foundation for sales, that you can persuade somebody because you can build rapport. And many, many times people will find out that they are essentially seen as trusting and persuasive individuals through this journey, through this exercise, and they'll reject it. And they'll reject it because it comes so naturally to them that they think everyone's good at it.
They take it for granted.
They take it for granted. And in fact, it's an exceptional skill. And it's obviously a very profitable one.
Thank you for tuning in to the Top 1% Sellers podcast. Give us your suggestions and guest recommendations by emailing us at ash@connectwithash.com. Thank you also for sharing this podcast with your colleagues and social media contacts. To connect with us on LinkedIn, please send a connect request to ash@connectwithash.com. See you at our next episode. Thanks for tuning in.